Part 8. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 71. Gu Yunfan still has a good opinion of Princess Xingyu. After all, Princess Xingyu once gave him some training resources, but what he resents is that the king is not Princess Xingyu. Princess Xingyu is the most important person in the entire Xingyu Empire, which can be regarded as a relatively good princess. She never punished her subordinates corporally, but cared for her subordinates. Every time before eating, she would call them to the table to eat together. This is not difficult to see Princess Xingyu's respect and love for her subordinates. It can be seen from the time when Princess Xingyu spoke for He Wu that she was not a bad person. Thinking of this, Gu Yunfan sighed and felt a little helpless. There is a saying that cuts the grass without removing the roots, but the spring breeze will bring new growth. Princess Xingyu will die today, but she will not die like a human head being separated, but it will give him a painless death. Gu Yunfan smiled and murmured softly, "I haven't seen you for a few days, Princess Xingyu. How are you?" Princess Xingyu wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. When she saw the person in front of her, her eyes were already red, and her voice was indescribably sad and hoarse. Even so, she did not bear any grudge against Gu Yuntian, because she knew that the incident itself was his father's fault. There was a saying that was right. Heaven is so good at reincarnation, who will be spared by heaven? If there is a cause, there must be an effect, but you can't see the cause and effect, and you can't find it. At this time, Gu Yuntian, who was behind Princess Xingyu, walked in front of her and put his palm on her back. Princess Xingyu felt the touch behind her and thought she was going to die, so she closed her eyes. But Gu Yuntian did not kill her. Instead, he used spiritual power to help her relax. Her skin color also evolved through spiritual power and became no longer as pale as before. The voice also began to gradually recover. Gu Yuntian took away his palm and said coldly, "The fault is not with the children. You are not at fault. The fault is your father. If I don't kill you today, just treat it as you who spoke for me and took care of me before. Return the gift." Hearing this, Princess Xingyu, who was kneeling on the ground, looked stunned and said, "Haven't you ever heard the principle of cutting grass without eradicating the roots and the spring breeze will bring new growth? Aren't you afraid that I will come back for revenge in the future?" Gu Yuntian chuckled and said, "So what? Your strength will improve, won't my strength improve? If you want to seek revenge from me, you can do it at any time." Then he waved his hands without speaking to her and said, "You can leave before I regret it." A space crack appeared in front of Princess Xingyu. He knew in his heart that this was a trace of apology left by Gu Yuntian for his previous friendship. She did not hesitate, patted the dust on her body and walked in. From now on, she is no longer the princess of the Star Moon Empire, but the ghost girl who dominates the profound heaven continent from now on. Gu Yunfan on the side saw this and did not stop him. He also did not want to kill Princess Xingyu. At this moment, Gu Jidan led everyone from the Gu family in, and happened to see this scene. He moved the corners of his mouth slightly, shook his head and sighed, but did not say what he wanted to say. As far as he knew, Princess Xingyu's cultivation talent was not very good. He didn't know how long it would take to get revenge. Just like Gu Yuntian said, "If you will improve your strength, won't I?" So Gu Jidan didn't care. He still had a good impression of Princess Xingyu, and letting her live wouldn't cause much trouble. When the two of them saw their Gu Jidan and others coming, they quickly raised their hands and said, "Dad, second uncle, third uncle." Gu Jidan and others nodded, smiled, and said, "Now I have suppressed the situation outside, but one person still escaped." The two frowned and asked, "Who escaped?" "The great enshrinement of the Star Moon Empire is Yu Sheng. My father's strength is only at the peak of the Wuzong. He is no match for him, so I can't keep him." Gu Jidan felt helpless. If it weren't for his strength, he would still be able to retain Yu Sheng. but the two of them waved their hands and said with a smile, "It's just Yu Sheng. One day he will show up, and that will be the day he must die." When Gu Zhidan heard this, he shook his head and said, "My father is afraid that this person is playing dirty tricks. After all, not everyone in my Gu family has the strength of the venerable level." These words made the two of them nod involuntarily. Those who play dirty are indeed more difficult to deal with. Before Gu Yuntian could speak, a series of collision sounds came from the outside world. "What's going on?" Gu Yuntian frowned. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure in white robe appeared in front of everyone. It was Bai Jianxing. With a smile on his face, he handed over to everyone and said, "Thank you all for helping me, Black House, to eradicate the martial venerable of the Star Moon Empire. I will leave the rest to Black House to handle." Upon hearing this, Gu Yunfan's face became angry and he yelled, "What do you mean? This makes you look like if you don't explain what you mean, I will beat you into a pig." Seeing that it was Gu Yunfan who was speaking, Bai Jianxing did not dare to neglect him. After all, he had seen all the fighting outside just now. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised at that time. He did not expect that in addition to Gu Yuntian, who was at the peak of martial venerable, there was another person in the Gu family. Gu Yunfan is invincible in the same realm. A 2-level martial venerable, but he is still invincible in the same realm. The martial venerable is in the Star Moon Empire. Oh no. It should be said that it should be the only one in the entire Profound Heaven continent. He quickly waved his hands and said, "Brother Yunfan, I don't mean anything else. I believe you have heard the sound of fighting outside now." The two Gu family looked at each other and nodded. Bai Jianxing smiled and said, "That's the monster from last time. Now I, the great protector of Black Tower, is fighting with him. I don't have any other intention. It's just that this monster is very important to us, Lord of Black Tower, so I'm still fighting with him. Please don't get involved in this matter." Then he bent down and bowed to everyone. "Monster?" Gu Yuntian frowned slightly and asked, "Is it the monster I fought with before?" Bai Jianxing nodded, "Yes, it was me, Hilo, who released him. Now he is seriously injured and his strength is not as good as his peak. I, Hilo, took this opportunity to surrender him." Gu Yuntian nodded and said nothing. As long as the fight between the two did not hinder them, the rest would be up to Hilo. Then there was a sudden sound of air explosion from the outside world. Bang bang bang. Everyone looked up and saw a mysterious strong man in purple robe holding a sword and fighting against the red god tiger. The blood hole on Qi Shenhu's chest has recovered, but now there is another small wound on his arm, chest, and neck, all of which were made by the purple robe protector with his sword. "Damn it, if I hadn't been seriously injured, how could an ant like you have been able to fight with me for so long?" Qi Shenhu's eyes were fixed on the purple robe protector. The purple robe protector did not speak, but murmured a few times, and instantly a large number of spiritual swords appeared in the air. The purple robe protector's eyes flashed and he shouted, "The sword cuts through thousands." As soon as he finished speaking, the nearby spiritual sword surrounded the red god tiger and attacked. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 72. Bang bang bang. Several spiritual swords pierced the red god tiger's body, causing him to clench his back teeth and feel a slight pain. His expression became ferocious, which looked really scary in the eyes of outsiders. The purple robe protector on the other side couldn't help but sneered when he saw that the red god tiger was still resisting tenaciously. Then he waved his big hand, and countless spiritual swords penetrated the red god tiger's body again. Ah! Blood spreads on the ground. Kishenhu touched the blood on his body, and his eyes became bloodshot and turned red. Then the red god tiger roared at the purple robe protector, and the roaring air waves made the purple robe protector feel slightly dizzy. The red god tiger doesn't want to experience the taste of tens of thousands of swords again. The tiger's body was shaken and he rushed forward desperately, and his huge fist directly punched the guardian who had not yet reacted to the ground. He said angrily, "Do you really think that this king is a soft persimmon? I can pinch him if I want to, but I won't pinch him if I don't." Immediately, he moved his giant palm, and all his spiritual power circled around and turned into a giant tiger. "It's you who forced me to unleash this move. Just listen quietly to the lamentation of fate." After the scarlet god tiger finished speaking, the giant tiger roared angrily and rushed towards the protector on the ground. There were streaks of fire behind him, like meteors falling to the ground. "No, this monster is fighting back before death. Damn it, you were careless." He quickly swallowed the healing elixir, and after a breath, the purple-robed protector's eyes flashed and he murmured, "I don't know if I can block this move." Immediately, his face turned cold, and he took out a defensive formation from the ring. The formation instantly activated and surrounded the whole body of the protector, turning it into spiritual shields. The giant tiger rushed forward and smashed the formation into pieces. The face of the purple-robed protector changed and he wanted to escape, but it was already too late. Phew! A mouthful of blood spat out. I saw that his left arm was torn off violently, and before he could feel the pain, his whole body was surrounded by blazing flames again. This flame penetrated into the depths of his soul, making him unable to resist at all. I can't even feel the pain in my arms. But just when his soul was about to be burned, a daoist figure appeared in front of him. The man moved his palm and used something, and all the flames on the protector's body were sucked away in an instant. The red god tiger in mid-air frowned, because he felt the aura of yin-yang water grade directed at this person. Is it possible that he is the person I am looking for? Before Qi Shenhu could speak, Qi Xiao, who was below him, raised his head and looked at him, and then a voice resounded in Qi Shenhu's mind. "Why do you have my familiar aura on you? Who sent you?" Qi Shenhu was stunned and immediately replied, "Is your name Qi Xiao? I came to look for you on the order of Master Chu Yale." Butterfly. Qi Xiao's expression changed and he asked softly, "So, you are hers?" The big tiger head of Red God Hanyo nodded. Seeing this, Qi Xiao couldn't help but smile and murmured, "I didn't expect that we really don't know each other before we fight, so I said, how can I have a mysterious feeling? It turns out that Yale sent someone to find me." Seeing his expression, Kishenhu said nothing. As if he thought of something, a small knife appeared in his hand and he threw it towards Qi Xiao. Then he said, "My lord, you asked me to give this to you." Qi Xiao caught it with one hand, looked at the knife in his hand, his eyes lit up and he exclaimed, This is the key to the demon emperor's tomb. Let me tell you, it's in her hand." Then Qi Xiao looked at the protector beside him and said, "He is the pet of an old friend of mine. It seems that this time we will not know each other until we fight." He patted him on the shoulder randomly, "You go back to heal first." Hearing this, the protector was slightly startled and retreated without saying a word. After the protector left, the two chatted for a few more words, and the only question they asked was how was Chu Yale? How are things? Etc., etc. And this fight was also seen by everyone in the Gu family who was in the palace, especially Gu Yuntian. There was a hint of fighting intent in the depths of his eyes, because the move Qi Shenhu just performed was very powerful, at least in his eyes. However, he also believed that it was because the Scarlet God Tiger's injury had not fully recovered, so this move was not fully utilized, otherwise the protector would not have simply lost an arm. Gu Yunfan on the side saw his brother's eyes and couldn't help but smile and said, "Brother, is it possible that you still want to fight him again?" Gu Yuntian nodded and said, "Of course I think, after all, I already feel that my strength is about to break through. This feeling is very strong, maybe I need to fight to break through." Gu Yunfan's expression was shocked, showing a surprised look, and said happily, "Brother, you mean you are about to break through semi-saint? Gu Yuntian nodded and said, yes, I have already felt it. The half-saint realm is not far away from me. This sentence made Gu Yunfan say happily, that's great, our Gu family is about to produce a strong semi-saint. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the Gu family looked at Gu Yuntian with shining eyes. Seeing everyone's expressions and his father's surprised expression, he couldn't help but smile helplessly and sighed, yes, my Gu family is going to have a semi-saint, but Han Han won't be able to see this. When Gu Yunfan heard this, he looked at the people nearby, and everyone in the Gu family showed a hint of embarrassment. After all, this was just an act, and Gu Yuehan was not really dead. Gu Chidan glanced at Gu Yunfan, smiled and nodded, indicating that he could explain the reason to Yuntian. Seeing his father nodding to him, Gu Yunfan didn't hide anything anymore, and said to Gu Yuntian with a sullen face, brother, I want to tell you something. Gu Yuntian took a look and said, say it. Gu Yunfan scratched his chin again and hesitated, actually, in fact, Sister Han Han is not dead. What? Hearing this, Gu Yuntian frowned. Seeing his elder brother's expression, Gu Yunfan knew that he might be beaten if he spoke out. But he felt it was better to speak out. He said in a deep voice, brother, actually we lied to you. Sister Han Han is not dead. She has been traveling outside. The reason why we are like this is because you are too loyal to the current king, and the king treats you like that. We couldn't stand it, so we came up with this method. If you want to hit me, hit me. Then Gu Yunfan closed his eyes. Gu Yuntian really wanted to hit him, and even wanted to give him a punch. This lie made him cry so much. I really thought my sister was dead, but now it's better, it's a lie. He sighed helplessly and said, forget it, I also know that I was too loyal to him before. I didn't even listen to what you said. I was actually at fault too. Immediately, he patted Gu Yunfan on the shoulder, smiled and said, as long as it's fake, no matter it's true or not, today's events have passed, and yesterday has become history. As long as Han Han is fine. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 73. Half a month later. In the dark and gloomy canyon, a man wearing a purple robe and a mask with a ghost face was engaged in a crushing battle with a seductive woman. These two people are Soul Demon and Chu Yale. She saw the Soul Demon's palm aiming at her neck and sucking on her. In an instant, Chu Yale's body flew uncontrollably into the Soul Demon's hand. Looking at Chu Yale's struggling face, the face hidden under the mask outlined a smile and said, she is quite pretty. Chu Yale struggled and said, you, who are you? Why, do you know that I am here? Huh, You have such a big arrogance. You dare to call yourself I in front of me, his eyes hidden under the mask flashed and he said sternly. Before Chu Yale could continue, the Soul Demon threw her onto the boulder aside with a bang. The boulder shattered, and the Soul Demon just patted the dust on his hands. He had no sympathy for her. In his eyes, only Qin Xian's orders were supreme. Chu Yale in the rubble was covered in blood, her slender white thighs were exposed in front of the Soul Demon, and her face was filled with pitiful expressions. She really wanted to make people feel pity for her. But who is the Soul Demon? He is Qin Xian's man, and like Qin Xian, he has no idea of pitying women and cherishing jade. Stop pretending to be pitiful for me here. There is no such thing as pity in my eyes. Death is the best destination, Soul Demon said slowly, with his hands behind his back. Seeing that the Soul Demon was so dissatisfied with fireworks, Chu Yale had no need to pretend anymore. Her expression instantly became cold and she said, so what if you tell me this? Come directly if you want to kill me. The Soul Demon smiled coldly, walked over, raised her chin and said, "You can't die, you are still valuable. If you die, I will be sorry for your skin." Chuyale frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" The soul demon didn't reply to his words. A dark fire arose in the palm of his hand, and then he raised his hand and rushed. The flames instantly flew into the center of Chuyale's eyebrows. Without a breath, Chuyale's expression instantly became ferocious, completely losing its previous cold expression. After a stick of incense, Chuyale's complexion returned to normal, her eyes looked at the soul demon respectfully, she knelt on one knee and said, "Chuyale pays homage to the master." The soul demon nodded and smiled and said, "From now on, you are the deputy master of my soul palace. No one can transfer you without my order. Of course, you must also remember that my master's orders cannot be disobeyed. Apart from him, you do not have to accept others. Do you understand?" Chuyale smiled seductively, nodded, and said yes. Immediately, Soul Demon waved his hand, and 5 men in black robes with the word soul written on their chests appeared in front of him. They knelt down on one knee and shouted, "I'll wait to see the palace master." The soul demon nodded slightly and said, "Get up. Did you see the woman next to me?" The 5 of them looked up and saw Chuyale looking at them with a smile on her face, which looked pretty even to say the least. Then, the voice of the soul demon sounded in their minds, "From now on, she is the deputy master of the soul palace. Her position and power are above you. You must obey her instructions. Do you understand?" The 5 people's eyes were shocked without speaking, and they nodded. Then he started to change direction and cupped his hands to Chuyale, who was standing aside, "See the deputy hall master." Chuyale laughed slightly, and a numb voice sounded in their ears, "Get up." Seeing this, the 5 people stood up and stood respectfully waiting for the next instructions. Looking at the actions of the 5 people, the soul demon stood up and said in a deep voice, "If we want to establish the soul palace, we must have a sense of power, but we must also maintain a sense of mystery and make the world afraid of us. So this place will become the main hall of our soul palace, and it will also be the place where our soul palace resounds throughout the profound heaven continent. From now on, your 5 names will be called Soul 1, Soul 2, Soul 3, Soul 4, and Soul 5. You will also be the 5 guardians of my soul palace." When the 5 people heard this, their eyes moved slightly, and then they knelt down in unison and shouted, "I obey the order of the palace master." The soul demon nodded, then looked at Chuyale aside and said, "Do you have anything to say?" Chuyale shook her head slightly and whispered softly, "The master of the palace has nothing to say, whatever the master says will be whatever it is." The soul demon nodded and did not ask any more questions. He looked up at the 5 people and said, "The 5 of you will start with the Xiang Empire first. Give me 1 month to dominate the dark places of the Xiang Empire. If necessary, directly control the core of the Xiang Empire, do you understand?" "As you command." Then a space crack appeared in front of the 5 people. They looked at each other and stepped inside. After they left, Chuyale on the side leaned over slightly and said coquettishly, "Then master, what are you going to do?" The soul demon glanced at him and said calmly, "You should slowly regain your strength first. Your strength is too weak now, and it will have a serious impact on my soul palace plan." Chuyale's eyes were slightly disappointed when she heard what Soul Demon said, but she nodded and agreed without saying anything more. Then a space ring appeared in front of Chuyale's eyes, and the Soul Demon's voice came to her mind. "There are a lot of training resources here, including some martial arts and martial arts. You can try to use the resources in the ring to restore your strength." Hearing this, Chuyale arched her body slightly. Then the soul demon didn't say anything and disappeared in place. Now he had to complete a few things first. From the memory in Chuyale's mind, he learned that the 3 major sects of the Xiang Empire did not pose any threat to him. It is still a threat to the development of his soul palace, so it is better to eradicate it as soon as possible. Although Bai Yunfen, the ancestor of Fenjiun sect, is dead, there is still a genius in the sect, and that is the great elder Shen Xiyin. According to the soul demon, her talent will be able to break through to the venerable realm in a short time, so this person is already on his must-kill list. The scene changes. In front of the square in the center of Fenjiun sect, a woman with a purple robe and a beautiful face was in the first place. Her slender jade hands moved slightly, and a furnace appeared above the square. There was a flame hidden in it, but the flame was already gone. Went out. Seeing this, all the disciples in the square made a noise. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that the furnace is the life and death fire of the ancestor Bai Yuntian in Fenjiun. Now that Bai Yuntian's life and death fire has been completely extinguished, it means that the ancestor Bai Yuntian is dead. Seeing this, Shen Xiyan couldn't help but sigh. He murmured to himself, the ancestor is indeed dead, what should we do? If the news that Fenjiun sect does not have a martial venerable strong man is heard by the other two sects, Fenjiun sect will definitely perish today. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 74. While Shen Xiyan was daydreaming, an old-looking figure appeared in front of her, patted her shoulder gently and said, Xiyan, among the entire sect, who has the most hope of breaking through the martial venerable? There is no one else but you, so I hope you are ready to break through the martial venerable. Otherwise, my huge Fenjiun sect may be destroyed. The old man who spoke was none other than Fenjiunzi, the current leader of Fenjiun sect. Shen Xiyan looked at Fenyunzi on the side and nodded. She had also had this idea, but it was not that easy to break through martial venerable. Although her talent is strong, she is not in a situation where she can directly take half a step to martial venerable and directly break through martial venerable. Shen Xiyan wasn't too sure, but she could still give it a try in case she got a breakthrough. Afterwards, Fenyunzi looked at the disciples behind him and said loudly, everyone, as disciples of my Fenjiun sect, please don't forget the oath you made before joining the sect. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other. Before entering Fenjiun sect, the elders would make the disciples before entering the sect swear an oath to establish their loyalty. This stumped them. To be honest, they didn't want to accompany Fenjiun sect to death. They were still young and still had good years. Although their talents could not make them strong martial sovereign, they could at least become strong martial king. Even Wu Jun. Or you can directly join the empire as a worshipper. It's also very good to be a ranger and make a living. Who would want to dedicate their youth here? Everyone did not answer, but lowered their heads in deep thought. When Fenyunzi saw everyone's expressions, he couldn't help but sighed helplessly and shook his head. He didn't blame everyone. This was a very realistic thing in itself. But we can't let them leave so easily. After all, the sect has raised them for so long, and they have to pay some value. Immediately, Fenyunzi's face turned cold, he waved his hand, and a buzzing sound sounded. The entire Fenjiun sect was tightly surrounded by a spiritual shield. This was the Fenjiun sect's mountain protecting formation, which could withstand the powerful martial venerable. Attackers attack. In fact, this is quite ironic. The dignified mountain protecting formation does not have to defend the enemy, but instead defends its own disciples. How ridiculous this is. You can leave if you want, but the sect has raised you for so long, so you should pay some value, Fenyunzi said solemnly. So just give up half of your life, and I won't force you. As soon as Fenyunzi finished speaking, a blood-red bead appeared in Fenyunzi's hand. Then Fenyunzi frantically injected entering spirit power, and the next moment the blood bead turned into a stream of light and flew towards everyone. When everyone saw this scene, they couldn't help but tremble slightly. The one with the highest strength among them was only in the martial spirit realm, and the rest were just martial artists. Not all sects had resources like Profound Heaven section. They couldn't help but beg for help. He looked at Shen Xiang. Except for Shen Xiang, no one among the elders present could save them. Shen Xiang treated her disciples in the sect as if they were relatives, and the disciples in the sect also treated her with full respect. What's more, he is also extremely powerful, and Feng Yunzi's own strength is no more than that of Wuzong 8th layer heaven. Seeing this scene, Shen Xiang, who was standing beside her, couldn't bear it, but after thinking about it, she finally decided not to take action. After all, Feng Yunzi was right. But at this moment, a figure of a man in purple robe appeared in front of them. This man was the soul demon who came to kill Shen Xiang. Seeing this scene, Soul Demon couldn't help but ridiculed. Well, is the majestic Fenjian sect actually showing off its power to overwhelm others? No wonder your sect can't get up in this lifetime. Then he spread his hands and said, your structure and vision are really too low, this is not acceptable. Then the palm moved slightly, and the energy of the blood beads was destroyed by the soul demon. Hearing these scoffing words, Feng Yunzi turned his head and looked at Soul Demon, frowning and saying, who are you? What does my Feng Yun sect have to do with you? Although he said this, Feng Yunzi was ready for a fight at any time. After all, his mountain protection formation had been activated, and the Soul Demon could actually run in without him knowing. This meant that the Soul Demon, his strength is not low, even very high. The Soul Demon smiled, and with a movement of his body, he appeared next to Feng Yunzi in an instant, and said softly, I am the Master of the Soul Palace. The Master of the Soul Palace? Feng Yunzi frowned slightly. He had never heard of such a power in the Eastern domain. Looking at Feng Yunzi's expression, Soul Demon shook his head and said, you don't have to think about Soul Palace, because you haven't heard of it yet, but it doesn't mean whether this force will appear in the future. But it's a pity that you may not see me again in the future. Hearing this, Feng Yunzi shouted something bad, but was crushed to death by the Soul Demon like an ant in an instant. The bloody smell of the mutilated corpses spread around the square, and all the disciples who smelled the smell made a sound of vomiting. Shen Xiang, who was in front, was about to hit Shadow Demon with a backhand, but found that she couldn't move at all, and her body was no longer under her control. The Soul Demon glanced at her and said coldly, there is such a big difference in strength between you and me, and you still want to sneak attack on me. Do you think this is possible? The Soul Demon raised his foot, and Shen Xiang was instantly kicked to the mountain not far away. There was a bang, and Shen Xiang was firmly stuck by the mountain. She could not use her own strength, so she couldn't get away at all. Then the Soul Demon ignored her, but looked at the people in the square, and said with a smile, you don't have to be afraid, I am not interested in your lives, but I am still very interested in you as a person. The first sentence made everyone put down their nervous expressions, and the next sentence made them start to feel less scared. Seeing everyone's expressions, traces of dark hellfire appeared in the Soul Demon's hands. This was officially what Chu Yale had used before, but this time the hellfire was stronger than the last time, and it was different. Without hesitation, the Soul Demon threw the hellfire into the sky. Instantly, the hellfire seemed to come alive and began to squirm and fly towards the people in the crowd. In less than a breath, all the hellfires found their hosts, and all the hellfires controlled their hosts and started fighting with others. Bang bang bang. The scene suddenly became chaotic. The Soul Demon did not pay attention, but appeared in the air in a flash, watching the scene coldly with his hands behind his back. The purpose of the Soul Demon in doing this is to select a few powerful subordinates among the weak. This is in the interests of the Soul Demon. Otherwise, if I raise such a large group of people, they are all trash. What is the use of raising them? A quarter of an hour later, the scene was littered with corpses, blood flowed into rivers, and one corpse after another turned into pieces. This was all because the explosion caused by the spiritual power during the fight blew up the corpses. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 75. Then the fighting gradually stopped, and 10 men and women with cold and handsome faces walked up to the soul demon, knelt down on one knee and worshipped, "I'll wait to see the palace master." The soul demon smiled deeply, appeared in front of them, and nodded slightly. "Not bad, we actually selected 12 subordinates with the strength of martial master, and their talents are still at middle grade. It just makes up for the vacancy of the lower level protector of my soul highness." The soul demon secretly thought that now the soul palace is short of people. Although these 12 people are a bit older, at least their talents are good and they still have room for improvement. As for the hellfire used by soul demon this time, it is similar to the one used on Chuyale that day. Once someone is invaded by hellfire, hellfire can make him burst out the darkness in his heart, and then slowly transform, and then he will gradually. She felt a sense of belonging to the master of hellfire, which was the case for Chuyale back then. Dark fire is also the best thing for soul demon to recruit his subordinates. This is much more efficient than slowly looking for people. If you look at the Shadow Palace, it is extremely slow to recruit people, but as for the soul demon, he only needs to wave his hand slightly to attract a large number of people to be loyal to him. Thinking of this, soul demon looked at Shenxian, who was in front of the mountain opposite. With a slight hook of his fingers, Shenxian flew directly out of the deep cave and flew in front of soul demon. The soul demon came close to her and lifted her chin with his fingers, and couldn't help but smile and nodded. "She looks pretty good." After hearing this, Shenxian's face turned slightly red. She turned around and shook off the soul demon's hand and said, "Humph, take your dirty hands away." The soul demon didn't mind either. The hellfire appeared in his hand again, and his eyes hidden under the mask flickered slightly. Seeing this, Shenxian knew what he was going to do next, and said angrily, "Either you kill me, don't use this to control me." Snort. The soul demon smiled coldly, pinched her neck with one hand, and thrust the dark fire into Shenxian's mouth. This time, the soul demon did not point towards the center of her eyebrows, but instead used the hellfire to penetrate into her mouth and devour Shenxian's heart. "It's not up to you." His nether fire is not absolutely 100% able to control others. Being able to control Chuyale also accounts for her strength and the reason why she was greatly weakened. But Shenxian is different. Her heart is very tough and dazzling like a crystal. The black light from the outside world cannot corrode it at all. This is also the reason why Shenxian can reach the peak of the 9th layer of Wuzong. The next moment, black light erupted from Shenxian's body, and her originally beautiful face became even more dazzling. Even her own strength had reached half a step to the peak of martial venerable. She only needed to wait for an opportunity to break through. She shook her robe, then knelt down on one knee and worshipped the shadow demon, "See the lord of the palace." The soul demon nodded slightly and said, "Do you still remember your previous memories?" Shenxian stroked her hair and smiled seductively and said, "Xian will certainly remember it, but Xian will not blame the palace master. The palace master can rest assured." The soul demon nodded without saying a word, then looked at the 12 people behind him and said, "These 12 people will be left to you. I hope you can teach them well." Hearing this, Shenxian looked at them and nodded. Then the soul demon looked at the area near Fenjiun Sect again and saw corpses lying on the ground one after another on the nearby mountains. Now all the elders and disciples in the sect have died. Only these 12 people and Shenxian survived. Soul demon touched his chin and thought for a while, then said, "Fenyun sect has been destroyed, but you are not dead. So from now on, you are the leader of Fenjiun sect." Soul demon pointed at Shenxian. "And the 12 people around you are your elder protectors, do you understand?" When Shenxian heard this, she nodded slightly without thinking about it further. Seeing her nodding, Soul demon didn't say anything more, and then disappeared in place. The problem of Fenjiun sect had been solved, and the remaining 2 sects were left. In the afternoon, at dusk, A purple-robed figure slowly walked out from the crowd of corpses. He was wearing a purple robe and a mask on his face. The purple robe was covered with blood, which had not dried yet. Every step he took, there would be blood under his feet. Blood was spilled all over the ground, like a demon. This person was the soul demon who came to the second section. It took him nearly half a day to directly slaughter the population of the two sects without any delay. The two sects have now become history. In the future, there will only be the Fenjian sect in the Xiang Empire. The voice of a sect. Okay, everyone is dead. You two, just go back with me, Shadow Demon said to an unknown place without changing his expression. Click. The nearby void trembled, and two old men in black robes came out. These two people were Yan Tianmi, the ancestor of the Fire sect, and Xiu Yun, the ancestor of the Wind Sword section. Yes, they were also attacked by the soul demon with hellfire. Got it under control. The strength of both of them has reached the martial venerable fourth layer realm. Shadow Demon is not here just to destroy the section. He also wants to recruit strong people for the Soul Palace. After all, martial venerable strong people are not so easy to cultivate. See the palace master. The two men bent down and cupped their hands. The soul demon nodded and glanced at them. He still had to explain something to the two of them. From now on, your names will be hidden in the darkness. You don't have to reveal your real names to the world. Your position in the Soul Palace is to protect the law. Do you understand? Their eyes flickered and they said they understood. After saying that, the soul demon didn't waste any more nonsense and led the two of them back to the Dark Canyon, which is the main hall of the current Soul Palace. The scene changes. Profound Heaven Sect. Qin Xian's legs were seen hovering in mid-air, and his eyes were tightly closed. Ding, the system has been upgraded and rewards have begun. Qin Xian, who was practicing, heard the systematic voice in his mind and opened his eyes. Ding, Royal Beast Peak, the law enforcement hall has begun to be established. As soon as the system finished speaking, two magnificent palaces suddenly appeared on the remaining 2 peaks of the 8 peaks of the Profound Heaven Sect. But it's not over yet. Ding, reward the host's strength to reach half the Saint realm. Ding, got the mission worth 100,000. Ding, get the top 10 peak masters, the strength is the venerable realm world. Ding, the spiritual energy of the sect has increased 100 times. Ding, I have obtained the allegiance of Emperor Zhenzong, the strong man, and my strength is at the peak of semi-saint. A series of 4 series of system tones shocked Qin Xian. He didn't expect that there would be so many rewards after upgrading. He couldn't help but said happily, I didn't expect you to be so generous this time. This reward allows Profound Heaven Sect to make up for the lack of senior management. But this time the system didn't speak. Seeing this, Qin Xian didn't bother to ask. Maybe it was because the system had become aloof after the upgrade. Now he still had to see the strong ones rewarded by the system. Qin Xian waved his big hand, and 11 top experts instantly appeared in the hall. They knelt down on one knee, bowed their hands to Qin Xian and said, "See you, Master. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 76. Qin Xian's face did not change, and he raised his hand slightly to indicate that he wanted them to get up. Seeing this, everyone stood up slowly and stood respectfully, waiting for Qin Xian's next instructions. Qin Xian stood with his hands behind his hands, looked at them with both eyes, and said, there are 18 peaks in the section. You and the other 10 people can find a peak to live on your own. As for your position in the sect, you are the peak master. Everyone nodded. Then he looked at Digu, who was wearing a star robe, and said, as for Digu, your position is the head of the law enforcement hall, and the sect's trial will be left to you. When Digu heard this, he nodded slightly and said, "Yes." After finishing speaking, he waved to everyone, "Then you can leave." After all, they were people summoned by the system, and Qin Xian was too lazy to paint a pie for them. Yes, everyone bowed slightly and then retreated. After seeing them leave, Qin Xian asked the system in his mind, "What did you update when you upgraded the system this time?" Ding, the system has now been upgraded to version 2.0. The host can use the mission value to purchase strong men. The host does not need to do the mission value personally, just post the mission in the mission hall. Mission worthy. Qin Xian was slightly surprised. Mission values were his biggest headache before, but now it seems that he doesn't need to worry about it anymore. He only needs to post the missions in the mission hall and wait for his disciples to complete them. Qin Xian nodded slightly. This system update is quite good. Is there still a daily lottery? Ding, now it's one draw every 3 days. There are good and bad things in it, but it won't be worse than one draw every day. Qin Xian nodded, and then asked, "Then you have been upgrading for 15 days, and you have been doing it every 3 days. You should have done it at least a few times now, right?" Ding, the host has 5 lottery chances. Qin Xian smiled. This time he finally got through the system's bug, and the system didn't refute it yet. In this case, the system will use all 5 draws. Ding, congratulations to the host for getting the Emperor Weapon Blood Dragon Spear. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining the Yin-Yang Mysterious Body. Ding, congratulations to the host for getting a luck bead. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining 10,000 Supreme Grade Spiritual Stones. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining the Demon Control Secret Realm. 5 series of system voices sounded in Qin Xian's mind. Looking at the things pulled out, Qin Xian asked the system, "What is the constitution of the Yin-Yang Mysterious Body?" Ding, as the name suggests, the Yin-Yang Mysterious Body can divide the host into 2 people, which is equivalent to a clone. The clone has all your strength. Hearing this, Qin Xian raised his brows slightly and murmured to himself, "This physique is so powerful, then if I encounter anything in the future, I can just let my clone do it." As soon as he finished speaking, the Yin-Yang Mysterious Body merged with Qin Xian. After a breath, Qin Xian's robes flew, and a black and white Tai Chi pattern flickered slightly in Qin Xian's chest. The next moment, all the spiritual power in the hall was injected into himself. In an instant, a ray of light surrounded Qin Xian, and then a man wearing black robes, with a cold face and no expression appeared in front of Qin Xian. This man looks very similar to Qin Xian, as if he came out of a mother's belly. Looking at the man, Qin Xian asked him, "What's your name?" The man shook his head expressionlessly. Seeing this situation, Qin Xian thought for a while and said, "In that case, let's call him Qin Feng." The man's eyes flickered slightly and he murmured to himself, "Qin Feng, Qin Feng." Looking at the man's expression, Qin Xian smiled. The Yin-Yang Mysterious Body divides one person into 2. It has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that Qin Xian only needs to stay in the sect from now on, while Qin Feng can go outside to help. He does everything. The disadvantage is that if the clone is killed, the strength of the main body will drop a lot. Now Qin Xian has the strength of semi-saint, and Qin Feng also has the strength of semi-saint. This can be ignored. After all, Qin Xian has something that can avoid this situation. A golden bead appeared in Qin Xian's hand. It was the luck bead he had just pulled out. Qin Xian already knew from the name that it could turn a person into a son of fortune. Looking at Qin Feng, Qin Xian hit Qin Feng's chest with the hand holding the beads. Just hearing a buzz, Qin Feng's identity changed like this. He is now the son of fortune, which is equivalent to Qin Xian being the son of fortune. After all, the 2 can merge into one again. Qin Xian also asked the system said it could be done. Nowadays, there is still a beast control peak that no one is in charge of. Since you are my clone, Take care of it for me. When Qin Feng heard this, he nodded slightly. By the way, let me lend you some clothes. You only need to wear these clothes from now on. A black mysterious robe and a mask with a ghostly face appeared in Qin Xian's hand. After all, Qin Feng and Qin Xian looked so similar. He was also afraid that others would misunderstand him, so he decided not to expose the news about his yin-yang mysterious body for the time being. If Qin Feng was discovered in the future, just be your brother. It's not that Qin Xian is afraid. With his invincible strength, who does he need to be afraid of? There is no need to be afraid at all, he just wants to maintain a sense of mystery. Qin Feng nodded and put on his clothes. When he looked at it, he was wearing a mysterious robe and a ghostly face mask, which made him even more mysterious. Not bad, he is more handsome than me, Qin Xian smiled and nodded. Qin Feng did not speak, which made Qin Xian have to suspect that the personality of the clone seemed to have changed. But he didn't say much, let him retreat, and then opened the Sect interface. Profound Heaven Sect. Sect Leader, Qin Xian. Elders, 245. Disciples, 3,285. Can the Sect interface of the system be changed at will? Qin Xian asked. Ding, it can be changed after the system is updated, positions will be created for the convenience of the host. Qin Xian nodded and arranged them one by one according to the disciples and elders of the sect from high to low. After a cup of tea. Profound Heaven Sect. Great Elder Ling Wu, Second Elder Wu Huai. Refining Elixir Peak Xiaoran Artifact Refining Peak Master Character. Spirit Beast Peak Master Yin Yang Ziyu Beast Peak Master Qin Feng. The Lord of the Law Enforcement Hall Digu, Shadow Hall Shadow Demon, Soul Hall Soul Demon. That's great, Qin Xian nodded, and then appeared on the top of the sect leader's peak. Today, there are 2 demon suppression towers and a mirror tower on the left and right sides of the current sect master peak. There are many disciples lining up below to challenge. There are 2 powerful martial arts masters guarding the 2 towers. The demon suppression tower will get equal rewards for how many demons are destroyed. As for the mirror tower, you can break through your own upper limit. The mirror tower will copy your other side. When you fight with yourself, you can see where your shortcomings are. The top of the demon suppression tower flashed with several large characters in light blue, and the names were marked on them. The first place was Yun Fenji, the second place was Zhao Lei, the third place was Song Shizhu, the fourth place. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 77. But within a few breaths, the ranking began to change slowly. Song Shizhu, who was in third place, directly passed Zhao Lei and Yun Fenji to reach the first place. This situation caused everyone below to exclaim. Fairy Fengyi was actually surpassed. This guy named Song Shizhu is so awesome. Yes, as far as I know, Song Shizhu is not a disciple of our section. He and senior brother Zhao Lei are friends. I didn't expect that his talent is so high. No wonder senior brother Zhao Lei and him are brothers. But a burly man was dissatisfied and shouted angrily, why can he enter the demon suppression tower when he is not a disciple of our sect? The man spread his hands helplessly and said, it's just because he is friends with senior brother Zhao Lei, otherwise how could he get in? Can. Just as he was about to retort, shouts rang out from the crowd. Fairy Fengyi is here, come on, get out of the way. In an instant, a strong disciple opened the way for Yun Fenji. The people who were chatting just now looked behind. I saw the person with long hair hanging around his waist, holding a sword forged with bright gems, his eyes curiously looking at the names on the demon suppression tower, and a hint of interest on his beautiful face. Fairy in phoenix clothes, fairy in phoenix clothes. There were disciples nearby who kept shouting hard. Hearing someone calling him, Yun Fenji turned to look at him and showed that intoxicating smile. When the man saw Yun Fengji smiling at her, he screamed even harder. Yun Fengji didn't say anything. She also heard that someone had surpassed her, so she came over to take a look when she felt a little interested. Although some people in the crowd shouted at the top of their lungs, there were always a few sober people. They are independent cultivator and the first disciples to become profound heaven sect. This woman's talent, even if we work together, we can't compare to him. The leader of the man in black robe smiled helplessly. Yes. Even though you say that, don't forget that our resources are equal to hers. As long as we work hard, we will be cheered by everyone in the future, said the handsome man standing aside. Hearing this, the man in black robe nodded. They still have a chance. As long as they practice hard, even if they cannot become inner disciples, they can still make a living in the law enforcement hall. Then a stick of incense passed slowly, and a figure walked out of the demon suppression tower. It was Song Shihu. Yun Fengji also happened to be standing opposite him, and the two just looked at each other. Song Shihu on the other side was a little strange and didn't understand why the woman was staring at him. Seeing that she didn't speak, he reluctantly held up his hands and said, "I wonder if this junior sister has something to tell me." Yun Fengji's eyes moved and she said, "I don't have anything to tell you. I was just curious that someone could surpass me and reach the first place. I also heard about this and came over to take a look." Song Shihu smiled when he heard this. The demons in the demon suppression tower were not that difficult for him. What was difficult was those demons whose strength had reached the martial sovereign level. Yun Fengji's own strength was only martial king 7th layer. She also barely broke the martial sovereign level. Song Shihu relied on the power of his master to reach the 2nd level of martial sovereign, otherwise he would not be able to surpass Yun Fengji. Qin Xian, who was high in the sky, also saw the scene and disappeared without saying anything. The battle for disciple promotion was about to begin, and he had to prepare the prizes for this conference. But the two people below did not leave, and there was a trace of fighting spirit in their eyes. After all, they were both strong men at the same level. It was rare to find each other. How could they have fun without a fight? But just when the two were about to take action, another person came out of the demon suppression tower. It was Zhao Lei. Seeing his brother with a woman, Zhao Lei couldn't help but joked, "Hey, Song Shihu, who is this woman in front of you? Is she your new partner?" Hearing these words, Song Shihu loosened his clenched fists, and couldn't help but darken his face. He turned around and said, "This is not my partner. And can you tell the occasion clearly before saying this next time? After all, there are dozens of people nearby watching here, and there is a Wuzong level elder above the magic tower." This feeling is very embarrassing for Song Shihu, who has experienced what he has experienced. This is equivalent to you being on the street, and suddenly a stunning beauty is walking next to you. At this time, your brother comes over and sees the scene and jokingly says, "This is your girlfriend." Isn't this embarrassing? They don't know each other at all, okay. But the melon eaters on the side didn't think so. After all, Yun Fengji came to him in person, which made them have to wonder whether Yun Fengji had that kind of relationship with Song Shihu. It's over. My fairy Yunfen was taken away by someone else. My heart hurts so much. Yes. But don't you think they are a perfect match? After saying this, the man raised his brows and looked at the two of them. He found that Governor Song Qi was indeed very handsome. Dressed in a white robe, with his flowing hair, and his handsome face, he looked very similar to Yun Fengji. Companion. Several people on the side nodded in response, "That's right. They are indeed a good match. They are both geniuses. Isn't it good for geniuses to be together with geniuses? What a perfect match." Everyone who heard this nodded in unison, and finally said nothing, just looking at the two of them quietly. Looking at everyone's curious and excited eyes, Yun Fengji said nothing and her face did not change at all. She didn't even know that she had encountered this kind of small scene several times. What's more, she was a powerful martial emperor in her previous life. Not to mention this kind of scene, even when all the saints gathered together, her face would not be surprised. But Song Shizu is different. He doesn't have people like Yun Fengji or Xiaoran who have tens of thousands or hundreds of years of experience. Now he is just a young man. This situation still makes him a little nervous. He scratched his head and said to Yun Fengji, "Well, how about you get out of the way first and let me go out?" Yun Fengji nodded and stepped aside. "Thanks." Song Shizu turned around and said thank you to her, and then walked out quickly. This polite thank you gained Yun Fengji's favor. Looking at Song Shizu's leaving figure, Yun Fengji felt a strange feeling in her heart. She couldn't help but shook her head, and walked to the demon suppression tower without thinking any more. Now that all her training resources had been used up, she had to break into the demon suppression tower to obtain resources. Everyone who saw the scene looked slightly surprised. This answer was a bit beyond their expectations. Just when they were about to argue again, the elder of the martial sect on the demon suppression tower appeared in front of them and said in a deep voice, "Okay, you little brats, the martial arts meeting for the disciples to advance is coming soon, you guys why don't you hurry up and practice?" Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 78. Everyone hurriedly bent down, bowed and cupped their hands. Greetings to Elder Qi. Elder Qi smiled kindly at them. "Okay, get up." Then he said, "The martial arts tournament is not far away. It will be in 3 days. Don't stay here and be lazy, otherwise you won't even be able to get in through the inner door. Don't cry here." When everyone heard this, they didn't dare to speak. Only a young-looking disciple stood up and said, "Elder Qi, don't worry, the inner sect is relatively simple for us." Everyone on the side nodded unanimously when they heard this. "Elder Qi, look at my cultivation level, which has already reached the martial master second layer level. We are only 15 years old now, and we will improve in the future." Elder Qi just snorted coldly and scolded with a smile, "You only reached the martial master realm when you were 15 years old. Then look at the geniuses in the sect and what realm they have reached. Have you seen those 2 disciples just now?" Everyone looked at each other and nodded. "Their strength has already reached the level of martial king. I'm afraid it won't take long before they can reach martial sovereign. By then, they may be noticed by the sect leader, and their status will be different from yours." "Well." Elder Qi sighed and said, "I really don't know what the use is of giving you so many cultivation resources. I don't even know how to use them. You know, other sects don't have such good treatment for you. If I were you, you should make reasonable use of the resources you have, take more missions from the mission hall and start practicing slowly, instead of just watching the excitement all day long. The cultivation world is very cruel." Everyone touched their heads and lowered their heads, not daring to speak. After all, they were indeed a bit lazy. Seeing the aggrieved expressions on everyone's face, Elder Qi just shook his head and didn't say anything else. He disappeared and reappeared on the top of the demon suppression tower, sitting cross-legged. There were some things he couldn't say clearly. Some people listened to Elder Qi's words, but some people didn't. What they thought in their hearts was just that, how to practice or how to practice. There are many resources for cultivation, and there are disadvantages and advantages. Now these people are the disadvantages. They don't want to practice with the resources for cultivation. They will know about it later. That's why Qin Xian wanted to recruit independent cultivator. The scene turned to Elixir Peak, surrounded by white clouds and filled with the fragrance of dandelion. In a magnificent hall with the word Dan Palace written on it. A handsome young man in a fiery red robe stood on the spot, waving his fingers constantly, aiming at the cauldron in front of him and squeezing the magic formula. Buzz. The alchemy furnace began to shake, and there was a bang, and a flame came out of the furnace and the lid of the furnace was knocked open. From the fire, 12 slightly ugly pills flew out, 3 were black, and 9 were not counted. Better. Looking at the elixir in front of him, the young man's eyes were slightly disappointed. Oh, is it so difficult to practice third-grade elixir? It's been 3 days and it's still like this. He couldn't help but shake his head. How? A shadow appeared in his eyes. He turned around and found his master looking at him from behind. This person is Xiao Ran, and the young man is Huo Yi. After Huo Yi's hard work, from refining the first-grade top elixir to the second-grade fire spirit pill, he stood out in the alchemy conference, and was eventually accepted as a direct disciple by Xiao Ran. In fact, Xiao Ran had already noticed Huo Yi when he was recruiting disciples in the western region. He saw Huo Yi's efforts, so he didn't directly accept him as a disciple because he wanted to test him. Huo Yi touched his head and sighed, "Master, it seems that the elixir is still not working well this time." Xiao Ran glanced at him and said with a smile, "That's right, let me come and take a look." Huo Yi handed over the elixir. Xiao Ran raised his eyes and looked at the pills of varying quality in his hand, and couldn't help but chuckle. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "It's nothing serious. I'm very pleased that you can develop such talent with your current talent. Just take your time with everything. There's no need to rush." Huo Yi nodded, "Master, do you think I should attend this martial arts competition?" After hearing this, Xiao Ran pondered for a while and said, "The decision of whether to go or not is in your hands. If my master tells you to go, will you definitely go?" "Master, I want to go." Huo Yi nodded. After all, although alchemist is respected by human venerable, his strength is low. Even if he becomes a top alchemist, he is just a slave to others, and the disciple wants to become a person who cultivates both Dan and Wu. Xiao Ran couldn't help but look at Huo Yi with a shocked expression. "Are you serious? You must understand that the path of dual cultivation of alchemy and martial arts is more difficult than becoming a puppet master. The only person who can cultivate alchemy and martial dao to the peak in profound heaven continent for several epochs is the great emperor of alchemy and martial arts. Master, I want to take this path." Huo Yi clenched his fists and said with firm eyes. "You have a good ambition. When your alchemy and martial dao talents can catch up with your master, then you can become what you want to be." An indifferent voice sounded in the hall. The person who came was none other than Qin Xian, the sect leader of our Profound Heaven section. He came this time because he had something to tell Xiao Ran and happened to see this scene. "Sect Master," Xiao Ran cupped his hands and said. Qin Xian nodded slightly. Huo Yi, who was in a daze, saw his master calling this man the sect master, and immediately understood who he was. Without thinking too much, he quickly prostrated himself. "Disciple Huo Yi pays homage to the sect master." "Get up." Qin Xian raised his hand slightly to indicate that he should get up. Huo Yi stepped aside nervously. After all, no one in the entire Profound Heaven sect knew the secret of the sect master. Normally, no one could be seen at all, and almost all of them were Xiao Ran and Ling Gu. "Don't be nervous. I just want to discuss something with your master. If you feel uncomfortable, you can stay away first." Hearing Qin Xian's gentle voice, Huo Yi suddenly lost the feeling of nervousness and fear in his heart, and thought in his heart that the sect master didn't seem so scary. He immediately bowed his hands to Qin Xian and retreated. Looking at Huo Yi's back, Qin Xian joked, "Master Xiao, you have done well as a disciple. It is rare to have a physique like the elixir spirit body." Xiao Ran smiled and said, "The sect master has given me the reward. How can my disciples compare to the sect master's 4 disciples? The saint grade qualification coupled with the innate sword body is not comparable to the Dan spirit body. Even if you can't break through the Nao Emperor realm in the future, the half Emperor realm can still be guaranteed." Qin Xian said nothing, nodded and turned his back to him, looking into the distance. People who have lived for tens of thousands of years are full of top ideas, Qin Xian can't compare with him. The sect martial arts meeting is about to begin, you should know, right? Xiao Ran nodded. I received a request from the Central Continent. It says that the Profound Heaven Continent 5 domain competition will begin in 1 month. Having said this, Qin Xian glanced at him sideways and said, as the former great emperor of Tianlong, you should know something. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 79. Xiao Ran bowed and said, Sect Master, this is a good thing. The 5 Realms competition has begun, which means that the Tianqian secret realm has been opened. Secret realm? Qin Xian raised his eyebrows. Speaking of this, he seemed to have pulled out a demon control secret realm from the system before. He still hasn't figured out how to use this thing. Sect Master, the Tianqian secret realm was formed when the 8 emperors joined forces to gather the core of the entire continent. There are countless precious treasures in it. I also relied on the resources and treasures in the secret realm to break through the martial saint. Otherwise, I might have to go then delay it for a few years. Qin Xian nodded, glanced at Xiao Ran and said, what do you mean? Seeing Qin Xian asking himself, Xiao Ran said, Sect Master, I wonder if you can use your true body now. Qin Xian frowned when he heard this. His current strength is at the early stage of semi-saint. I can use the power of semi-saint. Is this kind of strength feasible? Xiao Ran thought for a while, nodded and said, semi-saint is strong enough. Of course, it would be better if it is a strong martial saint. Qin Xian nodded. He still has the mission value. When the time comes, he can just go to the system character interface and buy one. There is no need to worry about this. If it doesn't work, just call the top 10 peak masters. Let's do this. After this martial arts meeting is completed, you will lead the winning disciples of this martial arts meeting to the central region. What do you think? Xiao Ran nodded, indicating that it was okay, and then asked, Sect Master, aren't you going this time? Qin Xian shook his head and said, I won't go there personally this time. It won't be of much use if I go, but I will send 2 strong men to protect your safety on the road. Xiao Ran was a little confused, but he still nodded. After all, there were several mysterious strong men in the sect that he had never seen before recently, and all of them were at the venerable level. He suppressed the doubts in his heart and did not ask too much. Looking at Xiao Ran's puzzled expression, Qin Xian couldn't help but guess what he was thinking and said, okay, I have to deal with some things. You should think about it yourself first. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Xian disappeared. The other side. Linshan Courtyard. Ghost Ice Crystal, Lin Tian condensed the nearby spiritual energy and swirled it around himself, and the next moment he waved his hands at his side. Whoa, boom. Blue spiritual energy burst out. Swish, squeak. In an instant, the entire courtyard was covered with layers of ice crystals, and a cold breath filled the entire courtyard. Even the outside of the courtyard was attacked by ice. Lin Tianbing's blue eyes flashed and he murmured to himself, the power is still pretty good. Then he sighed again, I don't know when Ling Er will be resurrected. Lin Tian shook his head. Just as Lin Tian sighed, a daoist figure appeared beside him. The figure patted his shoulder and said, how is it? How far have you practiced? The sound of a gentle spring breeze sounded in Lin Tian's ears, and his expression was startled, and then he became happy. Master, Lin Tian said respectfully. Qin Xian nodded and said, looking at your appearance, I'm afraid you are thinking of the woman who sacrificed for you again, right? Lin Tian touched his head and his face couldn't help but turn a little red. Master, is there any way you can save her? Hearing Lin Tian's question, Qin Suandao said, "Let me think about this for a while." Then he asked the system in his mind, if the system wants to restore the emperor rank technique to the human body, what will it need? Ding, if you want the emperor rank skill to return to human form again, you need to refine the spirit transformation stone with the 8-grade Suanli flower to obtain the 9 return spirit pill. Only this pill can make her return to human form. 8-grade Suanli flower, Qin Xian frowned slightly. He knew this. If he wanted to get this pearl flower, he had to go to the central region to buy it. Only the central region was rich in such flowers. During this time, he also learned about profound heaven continence elixir techniques and some special items. Then he came back to his senses and said to Lin Tian, "Maybe you can ask Xiao Ran. He was a strong martial emperor in his previous life. He should know something. Although I know something here, it is difficult to obtain it. You should ask Xiao Ran first. Maybe he has other methods. If it doesn't work, then come back to Master." When Lin Tian heard this, he nodded and said with cupped hands, "Thank you so much, Master. I will go and ask Master Xiao right now." "Go," Qin Xian waved his hand. Looking at Lin Tian's leaving figure, a flower with petals of 8 colors appeared in Qin Xian's hand. This thing was really the 8-grade Suanli flower just mentioned. He had just used 10,000 mission points to redeem the gift, and he didn't feel any pity. After all, he was also his apprentice's companion, so he regarded this gift as a gift. As for why Qin Xian didn't exchange the spirit stone? Because the task value that needed to be exchanged for this item reached 100,000, Qin Xian almost jumped. The task value was not enough and he couldn't buy it, so he had to ask Lin Tian to ask Xiao Ran. After a cup of tea, Lin Tian came to Elixir Peak. At this moment, Xiao Ran was teaching Huo Yi how to control the flame of alchemy and how to refine the elixir into supreme grade, when someone reported that Lin Tian was here. Xiao Ran thought for a while and said, "Bring him in first." Yes. After all, he is the disciple of the sect master, so he must still be given the face he deserves. After a few breaths, Lin Tian came in, bowed his hands to Xiao Ran and said, "Master Xiao." Xiao Ran nodded and asked, "I wonder why you came to see me." Lin Tian didn't hide anything and told him everything about the emperor rank technique and Xueling. After half a stick of incense, Xiao Ran frowned slightly and said, "In a situation like yours, as far as I know you need 8-grade Suanli flowers and purple spirit flowers. Both are indispensable. Only by surrounding these 2 flowers together and turning them into Green Mountain spiritual flowers can we restore her to a human body." Hearing this, Lin Tian's eyes showed a look of hope and asked, "Then Master Xiao, can you tell me where to look for the 2 things? As long as you tell me, no matter where it is, I, Lin Tian, will definitely look for it even if I have to travel across mountains and seas." Return. Xiao Ran glanced at him and shook his head. "I understand your impatience, but these 2 flowers are located in the central domain. If you go to the central domain with your current strength, it will only anger the monster who guards these 2 flowers. No one knows whether he is alive or dead. But you can ask your master to help you. With the master's ability, I believe these 2 flowers will not be a problem for him." After finishing speaking, Lin Tian raised his hands and thanked Xiao Ran. "In that case, thank you Peak Master Xiao for informing me." Xiao Ran chuckled lightly, waved his hand and said, "It's okay." Immediately, Lin Tian headed towards the sect's main peak without looking back. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 80. But Huo Yi on the side saw the scene and said what he was thinking, "Master, I have also learned about these things about flowers. The 2 flowers you just mentioned can indeed perfectly restore a dead soul. But she was transformed by emperor-level skills, so she needs a spirit stone, right?" Xiao Ran glanced at him and nodded slightly. "Yes, it would be better if there was a spirit stone, which can make the transformation more perfect. But he shook his head. The reason why I didn't tell him is because the spirit transformation stone belongs to the heavenly palace in the central region. The heavenly palace can be said to be a force that covers the sky in the profound heaven continent. It has as many as several martial emperors. There are so many that even if the sect leader goes there in person, it would be difficult to win. Then what should the sect master do if he finds out? Huoyi asked. I will make it clear to the sect leader personally. After all, the spirit transformation stone can only guarantee a high probability of transformation. It does not mean that the purple spirit flower cannot replace him. Huoyi touched his chin and nodded without saying anything else. Then Xiao Ran patted his head and said, Okay, I have explained the pill to you clearly just now. Let's see how you do it in practice first. As soon as the scene turned, Lin Tian, the sect leader's peak, trotted all the way to the profound heaven hall. The nearby disciples all kowtowed slightly when they met him. Lin Tian just nodded in response. Master, Master. Qin Xian, who was checking the system character interface, came back to his senses and looked at Lin Tian, who was walking over, and asked, Did Xiao Ran tell you? Lin Tian nodded and said, Master, in order to save the snow spirit, we need the Qingshan spirit flower, which is a mixture of the 8th grade Suanli flower and the purple spirit flower. Purple spirit flower? Qin Xian raised his eyebrows and said to the system, Is the system purple spirit flower feasible? Ding, yes, but the chance of transforming into human form is too low, only 30%, while the chance of transforming into a spirit stone is 99%. Okay, exchange it for me. Then Qin Xian glanced at Lin Tian again and said, You have to think about it. The success rate of purple spirit flower is less than 30%. Are you sure? Lin Tian looked a little hesitant when he heard this. After all, the probability of less than 30% was too low. He had to think about it carefully. The time spent thinking about half a stick of incense has passed. Qin Xian was not in a hurry and opened the system character interface again to check. Character Dowdy, one of the 4 evil beasts. Strength, high-level martial emperor, strength is sealed. Required task value, 500,000. Character Chaos, one of the 4 evil beasts. Strength, high-level martial emperor, strength is sealed. Required task value, 500,000. Qin Xian touched his chin. He looked at the mission values of Martial Emperor and Martial Saint one by one. Semi-Saint required 80,000, while Martial Saint, the peak power, required 150,000, and Half Emperor required 300,000. Martial Saint is divided into 9th layer. In Qin Xian's eyes, Martial Emperor and below are all at the pinnacle of realm and cannot be purchased in 1st layer or 2nd layer. Qin Xian didn't care and asked the question he just wondered about, why do they have names in the system? Why don't the ones I summoned have names? Ding, the summoned characters have no past memories, so they don't have names, but the ones they bought have part of their past memories. They were killed by top experts with only a trace of their souls left, and the system only saved their lives. But the host can rest assured that they are 100% loyal to the host. Qin Xian nodded and said nothing more. Martial Saint requires 150,000 and is still short of 60,000. The mission value is not enough, but it is okay to buy a strong semi-saint. Thinking of this, Qin Xian bought a semi-saint on the character interface. At this time, Lin Tian from the outside said something to him. Master, I want to give it a try, just in case it works. Qin Xian closed the system interface, glanced at him, and nodded. 2 beaded flowers appeared in the palm of his hand, and the spiritual energy in the hall surged into Qin Xian's palm like a waterfall. In less than a stick of incense, a soul-refreshing green mountain spirit flower appeared in front of Qin Xian. Then he slowly floated to Lin Tian's side. Then he said, Give it a try, and I will help you protect the law as a master. Thank you, Master. Immediately, Lin Tian took out the Snow Spirit Ice Codex, and the next moment the Qingshan Spirit Flower bloomed with his own power. Whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, Tianqian Palace was covered by streams of ice crystals, turning the entire hall into a cold palace. The disciples stationed outside didn't know what was going on when they discovered that the main hall had turned into an ice crystal palace. They looked at each other and didn't know what to do. This situation naturally attracted the arrival of more than a dozen peak masters, each with their feet in the air and expressions of curiosity and doubt on their faces. The moment they appeared, the space behind them would tremble from time to time, as if the air could not bear the presence of a dozen martial venerables. Even Degu, the master of the law enforcement hall, came. If you look carefully, you will find three familiar faces among the powerful martial venerables. They are the three statues of Wuyuan ancient city, Qisame, Yuxuan, and Subilong. The three of them were personally invited by Xiaoran, and there was no force. Of course, this was Lord Qingshian's intention. In fact, several people knew that such a day would come when Xiaoran let Subilong go, and they agreed after weighing the pros and cons. After all, can a sect with a martial venerable puppet be an ordinary sect? Also, the Profound Heaven sect's salary is so good. The Peak Master's monthly salary includes 100,000 spirit stones and a large number of elixirs useful to their realm. Who doesn't agree with this? Weighing the pros and cons is just pretending. The disciples in the square did not dare to speak when they saw this scene. They froze on the spot and looked up to the sky in shock. Normally they couldn't see anyone anywhere. This look is like the look on the eyes of ordinary people in ancient times when they saw high-ranking officials traveling with the emperor. Mid-air. Seeing this scene, Subilong couldn't help but feel a little scared, and looked at Qisame and Yuxuan beside him to signal. How could the two of them not understand what he meant? They were newcomers and the weakest among them all. How could they dare to ask the semi-saint expert? They closed their eyes one by one and pretended not to hear. Hey, you guys! Seeing the two people ignoring him, Subilong felt helpless. Then he looked at the leader Degu, pondered for a moment, and asked bravely, Master Degu, sect leader, will something happen to him? Degu stood with his hands behind his back, turned around with his tall figure, glanced at him, and said, with the strength of the sect leader, this ice crystal is no different to him than scratching an itch. You can just continue reading without asking too much. Oh. Subilong nodded when he heard this and did not dare to continue asking. Time passed quickly, and the frost on Tianqian Palace gradually disappeared. Qingshian's figure appeared beside them and said, Okay, you've finished watching the show, you can go back. As soon as Qingshian said this, everyone dared to continue looking down and retreated.